Several countries, including the United States, Britain, Germany, Australia, and more, have decided to temporarily pause or suspend funding for the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. So 12 out of the 13,000 members of this agency, also known as UNRWA, have been accused by Israel of being involved in the October 7th Hamas atrocities. Israel's allegations are pending an investigation, but until then, 2 million people who depend on this organization for humanitarian relief are in a very dire situation. So let's talk about the timeline of events. I should start this off by noting that first you have the International Court of Justice coming out with their preliminary ruling indicating that it is in fact feasible that Israel is carrying out a genocide in the Gaza Strip. And then they proceeded to provide Israel actionable things to do and to basically prevent a genocide from happening. And that includes allowing for humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip. A day after that, Israel comes out with these allegations against two members of UNRWA. UNRWA Commissioner General Felipe Lazzarini said Israel provided the agency with information about the alleged involvement of several UNRWA employees in Hamas's October 7th attack without specifying further. He said UNRWA launched an independent investigation. Immediately, the UN fired 9 people, even before any investigation took place. Israel makes the allegations, the UN takes it super seriously, fires 9 people. Some of the alleged individuals have died since the October 7th attacks. But really what's important to focus on here is that since 12 out of 13,000 people working for this agency were accused of working with Hamas, now you have all of these different countries suspending financial support to the organization, which is the largest organization providing humanitarian relief to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The timing is especially convenient for Israel, which I'm sure enjoyed being able to distract from the International Criminal Court of Justice and their ruling, their preliminary ruling, to instead focus on what UNRWA's been up to. Now, Israeli spokesperson Mark Regev told the BBC that an Israeli hostage who was released said that she was held in a house of someone who worked for UNRWA, and the claim has not been independently verified yet. So far, none of this has been verified. It's just accusations by Israel, and we need to go through an investigation. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said 12 UNRWA employees were implicated in the alleged misconduct. Of those, 9 were immediately identified and terminated. 1 is confirmed dead, and the identity of 2 others is being clarified. And so the consequences include at least 9 countries suspending funding to UNRWA, which includes the United States, Canada, Australia, Germany, the UK, Italy, the Netherlands, and Finland. The EU has refused to suspend funding, understanding the importance of the organization as a whole. And Scotland also refused to suspend funding to UNRWA. And I give them a lot of credit for doing that, because the idea of suspending funding because 12 people out of 13,000 people were allegedly implicated in Hamas's atrocities would be ridiculous.
Okay, so first of all, this is actually super easy if you lived in the real world where logic matters, etc. But if you live in the propaganda world that we actually live in, then it becomes a giant issue. So why is it easy? Well, find out if anyone actually worked with Hamas to help do the attacks of October 7th, and then fire them, prosecute them, arrest them.
100%.
And then, but don't do anything to the people who didn't work with Hamas. Wow, that's so hard. So wait, we're supposed to shut down an entire aid organization because a couple people did something bad in it. Well, what if 9 people in Israel helped Hamas on October 7th? It's not impossible, right? So should we end aid to Israel? I'm just trying to follow the logic here. Hold on. Let me tell you why they're doing this. Anyone that is helping the Palestinians is a target. So you dig until you find dirt. And then you don't say, hey, we found dirt on Bob and Susie. You say, I found dirt on the organization, shut it down, shut it down. And a lot of the Western governments they want to do whatever Israel tells them, and they're just looking for an excuse so they can tell their voters who don't agree with Israel, who actually don't want to murder Palestinians, so they can tell their voters, oh, we had to shut it down. We stopped all aid to that organization because everyone inside that organization is guilty. That's absurd. So why? Why are they stopping UNRWA? Why did they target UNRWA? One, because the UN's doing an investigation of Israel, so they're striking back against the UN. But much more importantly, they're the ones that are helping starving Palestinians. Now, if you cut off the one place where Palestinians are getting help, they're gonna be more desperate. Now remember, cabinet ministers in the Israeli government have said, we wanna drive them into Egypt.
Right.
And so if they're so desperate and they're starving, and you go, here's a little food in Egypt, and you go, well, there was nothing we could do. I mean, they went voluntarily because the only place where they could get food or medical attention was right in the south, where we stuffed them and then bombed them and starved them. Oh, look at that, they crossed the border, that's it, now we own Gaza. And Jewish settlers, run in, lunatic settlers, just grab all of Gaza.
That's exactly right. And in fact, there was a conference by settlers for settlers in Israel over the weekend where you have high-ranking Israeli officials attending and giving keynote speeches. We're gonna get to that in a moment because I think it's important to talk about that and its relation to this entire UNRWA story. But before we do, I just want to also give you some historical context in regard to the Israeli government's treatment of UNRWA and how they've wanted to delegitimize that UN agency for a very long time. Now, number one, that agency was established after the Nakba. So Nakba happens in 1948, and then in 1949, UNRWA is created in order to provide support and humanitarian aid to Palestinian refugees who were driven out of their homes, driven out of their land, and pushed into the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, okay? Now, when that happened, Israel was really irritated with the fact that UNRWA not only considered those who were pushed out of their land and homes as refugees, but that their descendants, that their children were also considered refugees. Now, why are they considered refugees? Well, because they're living in the Gaza Strip, they don't have their own state, they don't have the right to self-determination, none of that. They have no rights, and their lives are completely controlled by the Israeli government. And so since they're living in horrible conditions in Gaza, UNRWA continued offering, humanitarian aid to those refugees and the descendants of those refugees. Israel can't stand that and has always wanted to delegitimize that organization. So congratulations, they make the allegations against 12 people. Without an investigation, 9 of them immediately get fired, okay? And by the way, Israel could be totally right about that. I think that there should be an investigation, and if they're found to have aided and abetted Hamas, they absolutely should be prosecuted and they should be brought to justice 1000%. And if it is true that they carried out those atrocities or aided and abetted those atrocities, I'm disgusted by the fact that they have jeopardized the funding of this critical organization in order to do what they did. So I've got no love for them if they are found guilty of what they have been accused of by Israel. But with that in mind, think about what this means, Cenk. Israel doesn't want to offer humanitarian aid. They don't want to be the ones carrying out the humanitarian aid in Gaza. They've made that clear. And they have now succeeded in pulling funding, critical funding, away from the one massive humanitarian aid group that was giving humanitarian aid to Palestinians. So what's the future of Palestinians gonna look like now?
So one of our members suggested that, hey, why doesn't the IDF give the aid to the Palestinians instead of worrying about Hamas, for example, taking some of the aid, right? No, to be fair to the IDF, that's you can't have them do that because they'd be sitting ducks, and so they could get killed while trying to give the aid. So I'm fair, don't do that. That'll just get the IDF kids. And some of you could say they're terrible, whatever you can want, but remember they got drafted, right? And some of them might enthusiastically want to be there. Some might hate being there, right? But I don't want them getting killed. So that's not the right way to go. But then Israel says, okay, but Hamas stole 2 loaves of bread, so that we shouldn't send aid because Hamas might take some. Okay, so we're not gonna deliver it. Hamas might take some, so you shouldn't give any. And now some people at the UN did bad things, so the UN shouldn't give any. Look at that. It looks like there's no way to help the Palestinians ever if you listen to Israeli logic. And that anyone who does is, of course, terrorist, it's anti-Semitic, et cetera, et cetera. Now, so let me ask you this question. So we just told you very clearly we're against the guys if it turns out they ate it, and 9 of them already fired, so very likely. Okay, so if they helped on October 7th, they should definitely fight. And on top of that, we're adding they should be arrested. So now the Israeli government has killed 20 times the number of civilians as Hamas does. Where do I go to get the people who helped them fired? Because I mean, I'm told that if you help terrorists kill civilians, that should get you fired, and that makes sense. I agree. So, but the terrorist Benjamin Netanyahu has killed 20 times the civilians that the terrorist Hamas did. And I am being perfectly consistent. If you're disagreeing with me, then you're just flat out wrong. You're saying, oh, I want to call the other side bad guys, but when we do the same exact thing, I don't want you to call me bad guys. I want them fired, but not me fired. Okay, well, you're inconsistent, you're unprincipled, and you don't actually care about the issue. You're just being blinded by your prejudice.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, it's amazing that like genocidal statements by literal politicians within the Israeli government is totally fine, right? The genocidal statements, that's okay. The conference that members of Israel's government attended over the weekend, totally fine. What am I referring to? Well, over the weekend, right-wing Israeli ministers joined thousands at an event calling for the resettlement of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. I mean, they've already stolen a ton of land, let's steal more of it. And so Bezalel Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, both keynote speakers at the event.
Of course.
The conference dubbed "Settlement Brings Security."
Oh, does it? Does Israel look more secure, guys?
Was led in part by the right-wing Nakala organization, a group advocating for the expansion of Jewish settlements, which are considered illegal by international and humanitarian bodies. But I mean, what good does that do? They've completely delegitimized themselves, to be quite honest. The event called for Israel to rebuild settlements in both Gaza and northern parts of the occupied West Bank. Taking stage at the conference, Ben-Gvir called on Netanyahu to be courageous, saying now was the time to develop Israeli settlements in Gaza and to encourage Palestinians to leave the enclave. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said that the country is at a crossroads and that without settlement, there is no security. So I mean, now this is repeated, right? This isn't the first time we've heard far-right politicians in Israel's far-right government saying these kinds of things. So can the United States pull funding to Israel since they have people saying genocidal things or things in favor of ethnic cleansing within the government? No, of course we're not going to do that. That doesn't delegitimize the government of Israel, does it?
Yeah, Ben-Gvir is a literal terrorist. He was convicted.
Literal.
He was convicted of aiding terrorists. He has pictures of Israeli terrorists on his giant pictures of them, posters of them in his living room that he brags about. Hey, this terrorist killed 29 innocent Palestinians. I love this guy. That's why there's a giant picture in my living room. Every time I go and I look at that terrorist and love him so much. The most effective terrorist in the history of the world is Yigal Amir, who assassinated Yitzhak Rabin, part of these lunatic right-wing settler movement in Israel. So let me ask you something. If you love Israel, and you want Israel to be a flourishing, peaceful democracy and a safe haven for Jews, which I do you think the settlements have brought Israel peace and security? Legitimate question. Or do you think that maybe, hey, occupying these people for 75 years seems to have agitated them? That we thought they were going to be our good servants and know their role, and that they were just going to know that they should just be occupied forever, and they hate us. I can't believe they don't like us when we've been occupying them for 75 years. And we took half their country first, now we're taking a lot of the West Bank, and now we're thinking of taking all of Gaza. I don't know why they don't love us. I don't know why we don't have peace and security. I'm sorry, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out why you don't have peace and security. And the occupation, and the settlements, and you'll very, very likely have peace and security. I know what you think. No way, those Palestinians are monsters. They're all savages. They'll never want peace. You know that you sound like a savage when you say that? Okay, anyways, so you had a peace deal with Egypt, it worked. These are facts, these are obvious, overwhelming facts. Peace deal with Egypt that Israel did. It turns out the Egyptians were not savages. They honored the peace deal for decade after decade after decade. And you didn't have another war with Egypt. Why? Because you made a peace deal. Oh, look at that. Peace brings you peace and security. War brings you endless war. Settlements and occupation bring you endless war. Israel will never be safe and secure if they don't end the occupation. That is the most obvious thing in the whole wide world to everyone outside of Israel and Washington, D.C. The rest of the world is looking like, are you guys schmucks? Are you the dumbest people in the world?
Yes.
You think that the occupation keeps you safer? That's the number one reason you're not safe. What did you think, that they were all gonna bow their heads and go, of course, Israel will be we will be the servants. They can do anything they want. We love them, we're so sorry, we'll never fight back. You thought they were gonna do that. How stupid do you have to be to believe that? No, they're gonna fight you to the end of time because you're occupying them. If that breaks your heart, take it up with Israeli leaders, because they're gonna drive you into endless war. Israel's never going to be safe with monsters like Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, or whatever the hell his name is, and Netanyahu. All terrorists, all 20 times worse than Hamas.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.